What if every thought you have is alive? Not metaphorically, not poetically, but literally alive, shaped, structured, vibrating in a subtle dimension beyond the reach of your physical eyes. Imagine for a moment that your anger does not simply pass, that your fear does not simply fade, and that your love does not merely exist as a feeling inside your chest. Imagine instead that each of these states becomes a form, a structure in the unseen, hovering, radiating, influencing. What if your thoughts are architects, silently building the invisible architecture of your reality? Across the ages, mystics have whispered of this hidden mechanism. They spoke of invisible currents, of mental forces that travel beyond the skull, of subtle shapes created by emotion and intention. They claimed that human beings are not just thinkers, we are generators, we are projectors, we are sculptors in an unseen realm. This is the occult science of thought forms. In this video, we will uncover what thought forms truly are, not as fantasy, but as a precise metaphysical principle described in ancient esoteric traditions. We will explore how thoughts condense into subtle energy structures, how these structures influence your life and the lives of others, and why mastering them may be one of the most important spiritual disciplines you will ever learn. But this is not merely philosophy. By the end, you will understand how to consciously create empowering thought forms, how to dissolve destructive ones, and how to stop unconsciously feeding forces that drain your vitality. Because here is the secret most never realize. You are surrounded by your own creations. And once you see them, you can never think the same way again. Historical and philosophical context. The idea that thoughts possess form is not a modern invention. It is not a product of New Age imagination or poetic symbolism. It is an ancient doctrine, carefully guarded within the inner chambers of mystery schools and esoteric orders. In the Hermetic tradition, attributed to the legendary sage Hermes Trismegistus, we find the foundational axiom, "All is mind." This statement was never meant as metaphor. It was a declaration that consciousness is the primary substance of reality. If reality itself is mental in nature, then thought is not a fleeting abstraction, it is formative power. Centuries later, in the teachings of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, adepts were trained to visualize symbols with such precision that they would externalize into the astral light, a subtle medium believed to permeate all existence. Visualization was considered not imagination, it was considered construction. In Tibetan Buddhism, practitioners speak of tulpas, thought forms so vividly energized through concentration and emotion that they acquire a kind of independent momentum. These were not treated as myths, but as psychological and spiritual realities, requiring discipline and caution. Even in Western esoteric literature, particularly in the work of Annie Besant and Charles Webster Leadbeater, thought forms were described in extraordinary detail. They claimed that thoughts generate specific shapes and colors in the subtle planes. Anger appeared jagged and red. Devotion radiated blue and gold. Fear took on gray, fragmented patterns. Whether one accepts their clairvoyant observations literally or symbolically, the principle remains consistent across traditions. Thought has structure. Why was this knowledge hidden? Because if thoughts are formative, then mental discipline becomes a sacred responsibility. To harbor hatred is not merely to feel it, it is to construct something destructive. To cultivate compassion is not merely to be kind, it is to build a stabilizing force in the subtle field of human consciousness. Esoteric traditions taught that humanity lives within an ocean of shared mental substance. Every thought ripples through this ocean. Just as sound creates patterns in sand when exposed to vibration, consciousness shapes the unseen field through repetition and emotional intensity. This understanding transforms spirituality from belief into craftsmanship. You are not simply a believer or a skeptic. You are a creator in a mental universe. And the question is no longer whether thought forms exist. The question is what you are building, consciously or unconsciously, every single day. Core Explanation, Part 1. To understand the occult science of thought forms, we must first remove a deeply ingrained illusion, the belief that thoughts are weightless. A thought may feel intangible, but in esoteric philosophy, it is composed of subtle substance. Imagine striking a tuning fork. Though invisible, the vibration moves through the air, creating measurable patterns. Now imagine your mind as that tuning fork. Every idea, every image, every emotion sending waves into the subtle field of existence. But here is where it becomes more precise. A thought form is created when three elements combine: mental imagery, emotional energy, and focused attention. Thought is the blueprint, emotion is the electricity, attention is the builder. Without emotion, a thought remains weak, like a faint sketch drawn in sand. But when emotion saturates a thought, it condenses. It gains density in the subtle planes, and when you repeatedly focus on it, you reinforce its structure. Think of it like clouds forming in the sky. Moisture gathers invisibly in the atmosphere. As conditions intensify, the vapor condenses into visible shapes. In the same way, mental energy condenses into subtle forms when repetition and feeling accumulate. These thought forms exist within what esoteric traditions call the astral or mental plane, a layer of reality interpenetrating the physical world. You cannot see them with ordinary vision, but you experience their effects constantly. Consider this example. Have you ever walked into a room after an argument and immediately felt tension even before anyone spoke? Or sensed peace inside a temple or sacred space without knowing why? According to occult science, these impressions are not imagination. They are the residue of thought forms lingering in the environment. Repeated anger in a home builds a pattern. Repeated prayer in a sanctuary builds another. Over time, thought forms can detach from their creator and begin to function semi-independently, not in the sense of possessing consciousness like a human being, but in the sense of maintaining momentum. A sustained pattern of fear will subtly influence perception. A deeply embedded belief in failure will unconsciously filter opportunities. The thought form acts like a lens placed over your awareness. Here is the critical insight. Thought forms attract similar vibrations. Just as magnets draw compatible materials, your dominant mental patterns resonate with external circumstances and other minds carrying similar frequencies. This is why pessimism often reinforces itself socially. This is why inspiration can spread through a group like fire. You are not only thinking inside your skull, you are participating in a field of mental exchange, and most people are doing so unconsciously. They feed anxiety daily, not realizing they are strengthening a structure that will continue to echo back into their perception. They rehearse resentment, not realizing they're reinforcing an energetic architecture that shapes their reality. The occult science does not ask you to suppress thought. It asks you to observe it, because the moment you become aware, you interrupt unconscious construction. In essence, the untrained mind is like a child with unlimited building material and no supervision. But the disciplined mind becomes an architect of destiny. Core Explanation, Part 2. If thought forms are structures, then we must ask a deeper question. Who controls them, you or they, you? Because here lies one of the most unsettling aspects of occult psychology. Thought forms, once strengthened through repetition and emotion, begin to influence the very mind that created them. It becomes a feedback loop. Imagine planting a seed. At first, you nurture it, but over time, the tree grows large enough to cast a shadow over you. Now you are living beneath something you once placed into the soil. This is how beliefs operate. A person who repeatedly thinks, "I am not worthy," does not simply hold an idea. They construct a subtle entity, a pattern in the mental field that continuously filters their perception. Opportunities appear threatening, compliments feel false, success triggers anxiety. The thought form bends reality inward to confirm itself. This is why in esoteric traditions, self-knowledge was considered liberation. The mystics understood that many thoughts are not spontaneous creations. They are inherited forms, absorbed from family, culture, religion, media, collective fear. These forms circulate in the shared psychic atmosphere like weather systems. When mass panic spreads through a population, occultists would say a powerful collective thought form has been energized. When entire civilizations act from ideological obsession, they are feeding vast mental constructs that influence millions simultaneously. You are not only producing thought forms, you are swimming in them. This explains why certain environments feel heavy or uplifting, why some conversations drain you, while others energize you. Thought forms interlock, clash, reinforce, or dissolve one another, depending on their vibrational harmony. But there is even a subtler layer. Some thought forms become parasitic. A parasitic thought form is sustained by emotional repetition, especially fear, guilt, shame, or obsession. It demands attention because attention feeds it. The more you resist it emotionally, the more energy you provide. This is why suppressed thoughts often grow stronger. The occult solution was never repression, it was transmutation. To transmute a thought form means to withdraw emotional fuel and consciously replace its structure with a higher vibration. Like redirecting water into a new channel, the old pathway gradually dries. There is also the opposite phenomenon, benevolent thought forms. A deeply cultivated practice of gratitude creates a stabilizing presence in the mind. Compassion builds a field that softens reactive impulses. Devotion forms a protective structure around consciousness. Advanced adepts were trained to deliberately construct symbolic thought forms, geometric shapes, divine names, protective imagery, and hold them steadily in awareness until they gained energetic stability. These were not fantasies, they were deliberate constructions designed to shape perception and intention. The crucial distinction is this: unconscious thought forms imprison. Conscious thought forms empower. And mastery begins the moment you realize that every repeated thought is either reinforcing a cage or building a temple. The occult science of thought forms is not about superstition. It is about understanding the mechanics of attention, emotion, and repetition at a level most people never examine. You are already creating. The only question is whether you are creating deliberately. Practical application. Understanding thought forms intellectually is not enough. Knowledge without practice remains dormant. The true power of this occult science is realized only when you begin to observe and reshape your inner architecture. The first step is radical mental awareness. For 1 week, become a silent witness to your dominant thoughts. Not casually, precisely. Notice recurring emotional themes. Do you frequently anticipate failure? Replay past arguments? Imagine worst-case scenarios? These repetitions reveal the strongest thought forms currently active in your field. Do not judge them. Observation alone begins to weaken unconscious momentum. When you catch a repetitive pattern and say internally, "This is a thought form," you separate your identity from it. The architect steps back from the structure. The second step is emotional withdrawal. Remember, emotion is the electricity that powers thought forms. When a negative thought arises, most people either indulge it or fight it. Both reactions feed it. Instead, practice neutral acknowledgement. Breathe slowly. Let the thought pass without adding emotional charge. Over time, the structure loses density. Think of it like starving a fire of oxygen. The third step is deliberate construction. Choose one quality you wish to strengthen: clarity, confidence, compassion, discipline. Create a simple symbolic image that represents it. For example, a radiant sun in the center of your chest, symbolizing clarity, or a steady mountain representing inner strength. Each morning, close your eyes for 5 minutes and vividly imagine this symbol glowing with life. Add feeling. Feel what clarity would feel like. Feel what strength would feel like. This emotional infusion gives the thought form substance. Repeat daily. Repetition is the hammer shaping subtle reality. You may also use affirmations, but they must be emotionally believable. A forced statement creates internal resistance. Instead of saying, "I am limitless," begin with, "I am learning to expand beyond old limits." Build gradually. Stable structures are not rushed. Another powerful technique is mental purification before sleep. Before bed, review your day and consciously release any lingering emotional charge. Visualize unwanted thought forms dissolving into light. This prevents them from consolidating overnight when the subconscious integrates impressions most strongly. Expect resistance. Old thought forms will attempt to reassert themselves because they are accustomed to being fed. You may feel temporary intensification of negative patterns. This is not failure, it is exposure. Stay steady. With consistent practice, you will notice subtle shifts. Your reactions soften. Your environment responds differently. Certain situations that once triggered you lose power. This is not coincidence, it is structural change in your mental field. Eventually, you reach a profound realization. You are no longer merely reacting to life. You are shaping the field through which life reaches you. This is the beginning of conscious spiritual craftsmanship. Conclusion. You began this journey with a question: what if your thoughts are alive? Now you understand that, in the language of esoteric wisdom, they are not fleeting shadows drifting through an empty mind. They are formative forces, blueprints, vibrations that condense into structure through emotion and repetition. We have explored how ancient traditions guarded this knowledge, how mystics taught that consciousness is not passive but creative. We have seen how thought forms arise from focused attention, how they gain strength through emotional energy, how they influence perception, behavior, and even collective reality. We have uncovered the uncomfortable truth that many of the mental patterns shaping your life are not random. They are constructions you have been feeding, sometimes for years. But we have also discovered something liberating. If thought forms can imprison, they can also empower. If they can distort perception, they can clarify it. If they can bind consciousness, they can also elevate it. The moment you observe a thought without identifying with it, you step into authorship. The moment you deliberately cultivate a higher mental image and nourish it with steady emotion, you begin constructing a different inner architecture. And this is the deeper mystery. You are not simply living inside reality. You are participating in its formation. Every repeated resentment builds a wall. Every sustained act of gratitude builds a bridge. Every focused vision of your higher self lays another stone in the temple of your becoming. So tonight, as you sit in silence, ask yourself, what structures am I strengthening? What forms am I feeding? What unseen architecture surrounds me? Because whether you realize it or not, you are building something. The question is no longer whether thought forms exist. The question is what you will create next. If you are ready, observe your thoughts tomorrow as if you are watching sparks in a dark room. Notice which ones you nurture and which ones you finally allow to fade. Your mind is not a prison. It is a workshop. Use it wisely.